Stem cell transplants are currently being used to treat people living with various diseases. There are two types of transplants: allogeneic and autologous. An allogeneic hematopoietic stem cell transplant is a medical procedure in which a patient with a genetic disease receives blood stem cells from a healthy person, referred to as a donor. The donor stem cells create a supply of new cells. These new cells contain the functioning gene that can help make up for the genetic defect. The best results for an allogeneic transplant occur with stem cells from a donor with a matching tissue type, usually a sibling. However, less than 25% of transplant candidates have a sibling with a match. One possible outcome of an allogeneic transplant is graft versus host disease, which occurs when the donated cells attack the patient's cells because they appear foreign. Another possible outcome is graft rejection, which occurs when the patient's cells attack the donated cells. To prevent graft versus host disease and graft rejection, patients require medication to suppress their immune systems. Immune suppression helps prevent the patient's body and the donor stem cells from recognizing each other as foreign. Another type of stem cell transplant is an autologous transplant, which can be used in gene therapy. In an autologous transplant, a patient receives back his or her own stem cells. In order to treat a specific genetic disease, the patient's stem cells are modified with a functioning gene to help correct the disease. Graft versus host disease and rejection do not occur with autologous transplants, and long-term immunosuppressive therapy is not needed.
Hey there, welcome to Life Noggin. Over the course of human history, medicine has come quite a long way. Centuries ago, we thought the body was composed of different liquids called humors, and if you were unlucky enough to get sick during this time, your blood would have been withdrawn in a process known as bloodletting. Gross. In modern times, we can give antibiotics, perform open heart surgery, and even operate on the brain. However, one of the newest advances in medicine is stem cell research. You may have heard of stem cells before, but there's a lot of mystery about what they actually do. Why is this such a promising new field? Well, to answer this, let's shrink down to the size of a cell. Normal cells in the body are specialized. We have neurons in the brain, red blood cells in our blood, and cells that make up your muscles and bones. All of these cells carry the same DNA, which is unique to you, unless you're an identical twin. But what makes the cells different is that some of them have certain genes turned either on or off. The genes are encoded in the DNA, which is all the same, but the gene expression is different. This means that the genes expressed in a red blood cell are different than the genes expressed in a lung cell. And that lung cell will always stay a lung cell. It will not change into a red blood cell one day, however, stem cells can. Stem cells are unspecialized cells that give rise to specialized cells in a process called differentiation. When a stem cell divides, the new cells can either remain as stem cells or become other cells with a specialized function, like muscle cells. There's a lot of cell talk, but we're gonna keep going. There are two main types of stem cells, those found in adults and those found in embryos. Somatic or adult stem cells can be used to repair and maintain the tissues in which they are found. These can be found in the brain, skin, and bone marrow. In fact, during a bone marrow transplant, stem cells are injected into a patient whose bone marrow was damaged somehow. The unspecialized stem cells then create new bone marrow, allowing for the body to produce healthy blood cells again. Stem cells can also be used for organ and tissue regeneration. If the cells differentiate in just the right way, they can act as a renewable source of replacement cells. For example, stem cells beneath the skin can be used to make skin grafts for burn victims. And this could eliminate our reliance on organ donation and make the wait list for transplants a lot shorter. Stem cells also have the potential to replace damaged damage brain tissue, treating diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Furthermore, embryonic stem cells could differentiate and form insulin-producing cells that can treat people with type 1 diabetes. And the list of treatments goes on and on and on. The main controversy with stem cells, however, involves those taken from embryos. It's important to note that these cells are not obtained from fertilized eggs in a woman's body. Instead, they are gathered from eggs in an in vitro fertilization clinic. These are the eggs that were not implanted in a mother's uterus and were willingly donated for research purposes. But this does beg the question of whether or not a life was destroyed in the process, which ultimately leads to the debate. The use of stem cells are seemingly endless, and we've come a long way since our humble beginnings, and will hopefully continue to advance. So tell me, have you had any experience with stem cells or organ donation? Or maybe you know someone who has? I'd love to hear your or their story. And if not, let us know in the comment section below what you want us to talk about next. Make sure you come back every Monday and Thursday for a brand new video. And if you want even more Life Noggin, check out this awesome video we did on the science of allergies. And make sure you're following us on Facebook and Twitter. Links are below. As always, I am Blocko. This has been Life Noggin. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to keep on thinking.
As we look to the future now with these incorporation of targeted therapies and immunotherapies into myeloma and combination therapies, it's important to look for where we may go in the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the questions that comes up too is the role of a transplant, for example. And that becomes a recurring question now in the myeloma field over the last decade in terms of the role of transplant. There's significant debate about the role of transplant. However, I think it's very clear when you look at the data itself and multiple randomized phase 3 studies that there's still a role for transplant. If we think about that as an important therapeutic option for patients, I think it's still an important backbone that we can look at. And we've looked at even in the era of novel therapies that we saw from the IFM group, where they looked at RVD as an optimal induction regimen historically. With early or delayed transplant, even those patients with an early transplant had improvements in their progression-free survival, and too early to talk about overall survival yet. But I think that what that trial showed us that the transplant is still an important therapeutic option. And though we're maybe curing a small subsets of patients, really we're not curing the vast majority of patients. And so in this space, when essentially it's a non-curable disease for the vast majority of patients, you want to keep all your therapeutic options open. And that, I think, is important, that when we ask that question of, is stem cell transplant still a role right now? I think multiple phase 3 trials have shown that, but I think more globally, in a setting where we don't have a cure for the disease yet, keep all of your options on the table. In the next 5 years, with these targeted therapies leading to maybe significant improvements in long-term disease control, then maybe we'll have to reevaluate what the treatment paradigm will be. Is transplant still necessary? But again, that's a question and not an answer. So first of all, we need to have some more long-term follow-up with these trials, beyond just 2 or 3 years follow-up, but we need longer-term follow-up for these patients. And once we have that, then we can come back and answer that question with good randomized phase 3 studies. And importantly, there's going to be other options down the road, as well as BiTE therapy, as well as checkpoint inhibitors and PD-1 inhibitors, again, that are going to continue to change the treatment paradigm as we move forward.
Patients who undergo stem cell transplantation usually are brought into the hospital. They are tired from the chemotherapy and or radiation. They can have nausea, vomiting, headaches, but most of the time with the drugs that we are using, we are able to control these side effects, and with the medication that we are giving, I would say that the most prevalent side effect of a stem cell transplantation is really the fatigue associated with getting all these treatments. Another limitation is having to stay in a hospital for a few weeks until your immune system gets back, the blood cells come back. So, but that's usually something that people can go around and tolerate very well.
Since the disease itself is such a thief in that it attempts to rob them not just of their life but their dignity, trying to give them back their life and their dignity, I think, is the essence of the care here. When I first came to the City of Hope, the first reunion I went to had one patient and his family and a few nurses and the 3 doctors who were part of the program. Now the reunion is attended not just by one patient and their family but by thousands. We give every patient at the reunion a button. It says City of Hope, but it has a number. It's usually their number of years after their own transplant. And some people, the number is a few months, and in others, it's many years. It's emotional, it's inspiring. We think it's the high point of the City of Hope calendar every year. And there are patients who watch from the windows who look out and say, I want to be there next year. It's a motivation. It leaves us both in awe and very humble, but also very focused on if we can do it for them, we can do it for more. Let's get back to work. For us at City of Hope, the physicians and scientists who work here come to work every day to try to do something different than they did the day before. I think patients come here not for standard therapy, but for what is the future of therapy. The fact that on this campus is not just the hospital, the centerpiece, but surrounded by laboratories of people who come to work primarily to understand cancer better, makes us a community of care, a community of learning, a community of discovery.
At City of Hope, our doctors, researchers, and caregivers are working hard every day to find a cure for cancer and other life-threatening diseases. For the patients we treat, they're more than just great people. They're lifesavers. To find out about becoming a patient, visit cityofhope.org or call 800-826-HOPE.